Welcome back to the Business Roundtable Podcast. I am your host, David Carr of Steward Your Business, bringing teams together to accomplish great things. So grateful to have another brand new guest on the podcast, Amy Stout. We're going to get into a really important topic, and this has actually come up in different ways throughout the Business Roundtable Podcast over the last couple of years, but we're talking about wellness, burnout. How do we take care of our teams, our people? And Amy's going to give us a great perspective. I'm super excited to have her here on because I just love having different viewpoints and ways to share with our audience, Amy, ways to learn and experience. And so welcome to the podcast. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate you having me here. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Amy. So, Amy, you and I met, and a number of folks we've had on the podcast recently through Success Champions Network, one of our networking groups. And as I got to talk with Amy, I was instantly drawn in by the fact that we both have a passion for culture and people's well-being. Her in the wellness space, me in teams and kind of the organization. And so I thought it would be a great way to have you on here to talk about kind of the intersection of wellness and the leadership side. I speak with, particularly in these maybe smaller to mid-sized companies that don't maybe have maybe a robust program or support. And so I love Amy, for you to share a little bit about your background, what you got you into this space, and why are you so passionate about employee well-being?
Well, okay, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So I have been in the corporate world I was in the corporate world for over 25 years with consumer products.
Mm-hmm.
Then as things happen, pivot,
Mm-hmm.
my job was eliminated and I was starting a life coaching business.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't take off as I had wanted, which was good, obviously. And I found an opportunity that landed in my lap as a well-being consultant for an insurance broker. So what that meant was, for this insurance broker, anybody that was getting their employee benefits through them, I was their wellness consultant. And so that meant that whatever they wanted wellness-wise, whether it was setting up a lunch and learn, setting up on-site biometric screenings. I worked with a client of ours who was the healthiest employer of Illinois for 3 years. So it was just, meeting people where they are on their wellness journey. And it was so fulfilling to see people want to grow and develop into their best and healthiest selves. That yes, so I started my own business, and which is called Making the Connection. And so I partner with corporate clients, like you mentioned, small to medium-sized companies, really getting in there, because a lot of times, as you mentioned, wellness isn't part of the agenda. It's really it has fallen under human resources, and people have so many obligations under that umbrella, and wellness is like their side thing. And so it gets pushed to the side very often when there are other things that are more important, other fires. So to be able to come into a company and say, I've got this, let's partner and put together the strategy and the plan, and then I run with everything while working in tandem with my cohort.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. I think oftentimes, wellness. I like to this mentality, or this mindset helps me understand, like, many of us, I live in California, so a lot of us have cars, but we can run our cars and not get the oil change, not do the maintenance. And how long will that car last? It'll last for a while, but eventually it's going to break down and it's not recoverable. But if you're doing this intentional, proactive approach, and that's what I find too, Amy, similarly in organizational team space, sometimes it's like, it's kind of good enough. Yeah, but your productivity, your engagement is low, and it could be much better if you were intentional about it. And I think often, like what you said, is the urgency of things maybe gets over, I think you and I agree it's important, but sometimes the urgency of things kind of overshadows it. And it's like, yes, there are urgent and important things, but don't neglect this important area, because it'll actually be worse for your company and yourself.
Right, exactly. And that's why it is great to have it. It's beneficial to have it as part of the DNA of the company.
Mm-hmm.
So you tie that well-being, all those different facets of well-being, because it's really not just about, getting your steps in, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's physical wellness, it's emotional and mental wellness, it's
Yes.
financial wellness, it's
Mm-hmm.
leadership and development, personal development, professional development. That is all under the umbrella of wellness. And if we can weave that into the DNA of the company and align it with their benefits and their
Mm-hmm.
offerings, then when something else is important, these employees still have a way to get what they're looking for in terms of resources or support. And they don't need for one person to be doing something in order for them to get that.
Yeah. Well, so this leads me kind of my next question then, because I think most companies, then I agree with you, kind of just get it. Well, maybe I'll give you a gym membership or, some kind of uh, gift card thing or something, but it's not necessarily what the company and the workplace really needs. So, you and I, before we recorded this podcast, you're talking to me about kind of how you audit and look at things in the company. Maybe walk us through what you look at, so that the workplace, what's working well, hopefully, and
Mhm.
they've got some things. But what are the things that they're missing in the gap? Because obviously, like you said, we're not wellness. I'm not a wellness expert in my space, and I've worked with many companies too that I feel like they're kind of blind to it. And you
Mhm.
listed a whole bunch of areas. Could we just say physical, but mental, emotional, financial? There's a whole bunch of areas in wellness what you just opened up. So I'd love to hear you share more about kind of how you audit and look at wellness in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. So um, when I partner with an HR leader and they tell me, kind of maybe what's going on in their community, one of my clients was having turnover, high burnout, and high stress.
Mm-hmm.
So taking that information, I set up and create a survey customized for that population.
Mm-hmm.
So I ask questions about, how are you feeling? How's your stress? How's your at work? How's your
Mm-hmm.
workload? Do you feel overloaded? How many times a week are you feeling burnt out that you really just need a break and can't recover?
Mm-hmm.
Are you interested in learning how to create a budget and create a savings plan? Are you needing some social, what's the community like there? Do you need more social interaction? um, and getting an idea of their culture as well and how they all interact together. Is
Yep.
there a recognition program? Because that is huge in culture, especially right
Mm-hmm.
now. um, what they're interested in, the topics that they're interested in. So the wellness strategy and program is relevant to them and will see high engagement.
Mm-hmm.
What benefits and perks are they aware of and have they utilized them? And how can we push those so that they can utilize resources that are already there and available before we get into some things as we go along. So
Mm-hmm.
then once I get those aggregate responses, I put those in a recommendation presentation, and I present that to my HR partners. And then we go through what that looks like, what I'm recommending from based on the answers. And then I put together a 12-month program of, kind of what activities, what awareness campaigns we want to do. If, for example, one client is looking into wanting to do more mental health awareness, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be doing guided meditations once a week in the mornings with them just to start their days. So
Mm-hmm.
just little things like that, which have become more important to companies and to employees to get their employees in a state of mindfulness,
Yep.
has really been a huge help.
Yeah. Wow. You covered a lot of good things. It's interesting you say. I think that so what I hear you saying is you're looking at things across multiple areas. I love that you come up
Mhm.
with a survey. I mean, different businesses have different challenges. Let's just say I've worked in the environmental consulting industry practice, for example, Amy, and there's a client now that I'm working with, for example, where they have a lot of people that are just always in the field and some
Mhm.
people that are in the office. So the things that they're going to face in the office are going to be a little different than the things that are getting in the field. So understanding, like you said, from a wellness perspective, it's like it's not one size fits all. I'm kind of looking at the culture of the
Yes.
company. How do they show up, right?
Mhm. Yep. And how do they communicate, and how so taking all the areas of interest, how can we communicate with everyone? So is there an app? Is there Slack? Is there a SharePoint website or something like that, or text? What how can people get their communication so that they can take advantage of the information and resources?
Yeah. Well, and I'd love you to speak about this too, about what I found, at least in working with companies, is I don't know, for whatever reason, people tend to just isolate, and kind of they are suffering in silence, and they just kind of not quiet, and maybe they don't feel worthy, or they don't feel like, maybe they don't know the resources there. Sometimes I think even the resources there, but for some reason they don't feel like they should take advantage of it, or whatnot. How do you, is that in part of the surveys? Are you kind of figuring out where people are, like you said, accessing this? Are they just being quiet and not saying anything? Are you the first person that they talk to, like, I didn't even know anybody was paying attention to this?
Oh, that's interesting, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
David. So mostly it's they don't know of the resources available, so we have to point them to it. I mean, when employees are going through open enrollment, there's so many things to think about.
Yep.
And really at that point in time, they're more concerned with, what does my medical benefits look like and how much am I paying, right? And then you got the dental and the vision and such. They're not thinking of my EAP, my employee assistance program. They're not thinking how to access that. They're not thinking of, maybe a rewards program that they can get points for, and for doing different types of wellness activities with rewards. They're not thinking of maybe there's going to be a walking challenge coming up, or anything like that. In my whole corporate world, I hadn't been introduced to wellness in a company until 6 years ago. So it is becoming more mainstream, or more of interest, especially since the pandemic, though I think it still needs a lot of help in terms of getting the word out and where people can go to find what they're looking for.
I would be curious, maybe this where is there a difference in not just the company culture, but are you seeing a difference as well in different generations and what they're looking for in the way of wellness, or is it across the board? I mean, because I would imagine you're seeing some differences and what wellness is to me. I'm 51 to somebody that's in in their 20s to the 30s to the 40s. Do you see that?
Oh, yes. Oh, definitely. So yes. Oh, you and I are Xers, right?
Yep.
And so while the X's aren't so much involved in wellness and all that it has, the boomers surely are not. But the millennials and the up and coming Gen Z, the Zoomers, they really want everything to be there provided for them, so they can just go to one spot. These wellness programs and well-being strategies are more important to them than their compensation. They want to feel valued and cared for and aligned with the company's mission, and know that they can learn how to build a budget, learn about credit, learn get some professional development so they can build on their skills and grow their careers. This is what they want from their employer. So while you and I have stayed at companies a lot longer than some of the younger generations, Gen Zs really are looking for a big package in terms of these things, and they're not afraid to leave if somebody else has it, even for lower pay.
Wow, interesting. I think this is so important. So as you're on the Business Roundtable podcast, I love it. We don't just have business owners, we have other leaders. So you don't have to be necessarily a business owner. If you're managing people, listening to Amy here talk about this, this is important, and so it helps you become more relevant in their world. Because if they feel understood, like you said, and appreciated, they're likely going to stay a lot longer. They're going to contribute more, to be more engaged. So, what is because I think this is a challenge that we're seeing, and particularly I've seen, like you said, businesses that don't have a centralized location coming in. People are remote or hybrid, and how are you seeing benefits and wellness adapt, like you said, pivot post 2020, and it sounds like it's getting better. Yeah, hopefully. But how have you seen this into kind of the distributed workflows? Because that's what I work with a lot of clients that do that. They don't have people coming in to a centralized location. They don't even, honestly, maybe they do send out periodic emails, but you said, maybe the initial onboarding process, I could see where things get lost. Because if they're
Mhm.
not communicating this on a regular basis, if there's no centralized website, there's no emails, there's no regular communication, kind of hopefully you find it somewhere in the packet that we gave you of stuff, you
Right.
know?
Right, David. So, my one of my clients is all virtual. They're global, so they've got people around the world.
Mhm,
And we've done awareness campaigns every 2 weeks, a wellness
mhm,
newsletter with hyperlinks on a specific topic.
mhm,
The last one was burnout.
mhm.
So with hyperlinks and how to spot it, and what ways you can do to prevent it, or deal with how you're feeling about it. So we send those out every 2 weeks. We just had we do a lot of things virtually, right?
Mhm,
So we did virtual emotional intelligence workshops, one for leaders and
mhm,
one for staff. Those were at times where folks in the UK, on the West Coast, and then
mhm,
also in Australia could participate.
mhm.
For these guided meditations, we're going to mix it up so that some are in the early morning and some are in the later in the afternoon, again, to get people in the time zones. So
Yeah.
really, we continue to function and come together in this virtual world, and it's working.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, you have to be creative, I think,
Yeah.
what I'm hearing you say, and adapt. And but I love that. I love that you brought up meditation specifically, because that was definitely foreign to me, up until maybe, like you said, maybe it wasn't foreign to me, it was just not something in my regular routine or practice. And I love that you're doing that, Amy, because I find that reset can actually make you much more productive. But it's kind of
Mhm.
counterintuitive. Like, why are we going to take 15, 20 minutes to do a meditation? It's like, there's work to be done,
Yeah,
right?
have you heard the comment, "I don't have 10 minutes for meditation." Well, then we need a 20-minute meditation, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
people need to be still, where there's so much coming at us all the
Mhm,
time with, texts,
mhm. Everything. Yeah. So much
internet. I mean,
information.
it's so many notifications, so many things that you need to just sit, be still, and don't have any inputs, like nothing.
Mhm,
No music. Go outside, and a
mhm,
great meditation. Go outside and look at the clouds. Just watch the clouds
mhm,
float by, or
mhm,
light a
mhm.
candle, and that's a meditation. Just watching the light flicker. So
Great.
it's really about being still. And again, that's where creativity forms too. Not only
Mhm.
maybe you're getting reset, you can get clarity, but creativity falls in too.
Absolutely. Well, I love that you're holding this space, for folks, Amy, and being intentional. And I think as our audience is listening, if you're a business owner, or you're a leader, be encouraged by this as you're hearing
Yeah.
Amy speak. And I think sometimes it's a little, um it can be a little scary to speak up and say, "Hey, I think we should investigate or look at this
Mhm.
area." And the reason we have the podcast now, Amy, is there's a way that people can reach out to you specifically and say, "Oh, I know somebody that specializes. Let me talk with Amy and find out what could this look like for my company." And I
Mhm.
liked how you brought this up. Amy, you mentioned working with HR and finding strategic partnerships and figuring out this is not a one size fits all. And I feel like this is a really I really personally like this model, because sometimes, like you said, sometimes it's like HR is trying to be everything. And I think
Mhm.
I've met a lot and I work with a lot of HR professionals. They know their strengths and they know where they're not strong. Like, I do
Mhm.
some leadership and development things that they could do, but they're like, you know what? I'm better on the compliance and getting these other things
Right.
documented and dealing with some of the legal stuff. Let me bring in others like yourself, Amy, into the picture. Um, and so I appreciate that collaborative nature that you're bringing up, and I hope that folks that are listening to the podcast realize that it's not a one size fits all. Find somebody like Amy here that can help you in this particular area.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
because it's all about, you know, um, improving your productivity and, in the
Mhm.
end, improving your profits. Um,
Right.
because when people aren't feeling well, if they're burnout, if they're stressed out, they're not showing up, whether they're there
Mhm.
physically or not.
Yep.
They're not collaborating.
Mhm.
And then if you may get those people that are just kind of like, the bad seed, and then that, gets multiplied, right? But when
Mhm.
you have well-being, people feel cared for and they feel valued. And especially, as you mentioned, with leadership and development, when there's, an investment for their learning and their future,
Yep.
they really feel excited and valued and heard and seen.
Mhm.
And then they're more productive and
Yes.
they're doing better work. They're more creative. Your
Mhm.
profits are rising. They're an ambassador for bringing in new high caliber talent, and
Right?
you're retaining your employees.
Yes, it's a win-win, for
Absolutely.
everybody, but it takes away, what I find is like just like you said, you're creating this. It's not so transactional. You can create a very transactional
Yes.
environment, but you can be more intentional in that, and I think by just the way you're showing up and collaborating and finding out how do we work with these different folks and really bridge this shift from just, okay, I'm offering some kind of wellness program, check the box, which doesn't really, but actually what I like my word, steward your business, steward. How am I stewarding my people? How am I taking
Hmm.
care of them? Because if I take care of them, they will take care of me. It's a mutually beneficial relationship, right?
Hmm. Yep. Absolutely.
And I love how so, when you're doing your survey or going through those things to Amy, I'd imagine you're kinda looking through and saying, "Okay, like, maybe somebody's struggling, like, is it financially?" So
Hmm.
it sounds like but that'll obviously affect our physical well-being, but you're looking through the survey and saying, "You know what? Maybe I need to bring in somebody that specializes in financial wellness and literacy,"
Yes.
as you're going through and figuring out who's the partners, and I love this kind of partnership
Yes.
model that you're bringing in, Amy,
Mhm.
of, um because we have other business owners and other folks that specialize in these different areas, and so not they find ways like, "Hey, how can I team up with Amy? How can we help?" Or I don't know, for me, as I hear this, Amy, like I'm working on developing that team, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing the physical awareness. I'm not leading the meditation or thing, and I'm like, man, I have a client that really could benefit from this. Let me introduce Amy, and
Mhm.
so then together we're all winning. We're all helping each other rise. Again, mutually beneficial. I really
Yep.
like that model that you have.
Thank you. Yeah, so I can't do it all. So,
Mhm.
you can see me as the contractor, right? So
Mhm,
I need
mhm,
somebody who's going to be able to do plumbing and electrical when I can do all the other things.
mhm,
So like the financial wellness, leadership and development, that sort of thing. Um, that's where I call in those experts to come in,
mhm.
and do their magic to
Yep.
help these employees.
Yeah. Yeah. I love you mentioned a couple examples of worldwide company, but, I love hearing, some, other examples that you may have had in maybe different demographics or different industries where you came in and said, "Here's what we did, here's what we audited," and especially I'd love to hear, I mean, kinda what are the what are the gaps you're seeing right now? Here we are recording this at the end of April 2025. Where you're like, okay, these are some of the things I'm seeing pop up, and here's how the ways where we're addressing it. So that the reason I'm bringing this up because I want those that are listening in realizing, look, if if you're hearing some of these issues and you're not resolving them, it's going to cost you more in the long run. I had a
Mhm.
couple podcasts recently with a couple lawyers, and we're talking about getting those things set up, their legal house set up in place correctly. Because if you don't do it and you have a problem, it's going to be much more costly and challenging and take a lot more time. So doing this stuff on the front end, but talk about maybe some of those clients that you've worked with the front end, but also you can talk about those that have you fixed some things as well,
Mhm.
Amy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so part of my process is, you take the initial survey, we put the strategy into place, and then we also resurvey to see,
Mm, okay.
what went well, where we need to improve.
Yep.
So one of my clients is in higher education. They are not known for being high paying. They're
Mhm.
nonprofit.
Mhm.
And since COVID, the staff and faculty have had, they've all been longing for community culture because
Mm.
obviously it
Mhm.
died down.
Yep.
So they were also looking for ways to gather to do exercising together, to learn more about mental health, to learn more about work-life balance and balancing stress. So that's what came from the survey. So we began, this was back in 24, we began with, I had a coach consultant come in, and she gave a presentation on how to manage your stress, which in turn can help your work-life balance, which isn't real, but your work-life, how it, whatever it is, relationship.
Yes.
And then also, finding time for self-care. So we had that. I think it was like 80% of attendees responded that this helped their mental health, and they had actionable strategies once they left the presentation. Those folks were also looking for nutrition information and wanting to be better cooks, healthier meals. We had a nutritionist come in and do a presentation on that. We held a walking challenge, which I do love a walking challenge because even as you mentioned, your construction industry, everyone can participate. You might need two teams because those people in construction are outside and walking around all the time, but you can have two different teams and people are outside, they're moving, and there's camaraderie because now you've got a little competition going. So you're building some social culture as well. So we put that into place, which was a huge win. And we reassessed at the end of last year. We found out that, not everyone was finding out about these programs. So for 2025, we mixed up how we're communicating and how we're promoting. So we just had Wellness Week, and we had on-site chair massages, 2 days of them, which sold out immediately. We had restorative stretching, 2 sessions of that sold out. And I'm sorry, I got to go back. After the first year of wellness activities, 71% of the folks said that their mental well-being and their mood at work improved.
That's
so
great.
That was a huge, huge win.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned, this year we are expanding it and including new and different things. I did want to point out one thing, because you mentioned, what's kind of trending and what are folks looking for. So this has been new over the past 2 years that I'm having a lot of clients ask about team building and also supervisory training and leadership training, because we find, and I'm sure you know this, so many people are promoted because they've done the job. They don't know how to lead. They don't know how to communicate to employees now that they're a manager. So there's a lot of requests for training on those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, that's where we, definitely, I'm seeing that. I call it, they call it the Peter principle, but you're a technical specialist. That's what I was. And then you're like, well, why don't you be a manager or, and management and leadership are two different things. And I, from a health and wellness, it's very stressful if you've never done that before and you're feeling like you're failing, you're not doing it right. It can be very demoralizing. So I'm not surprised. And I think in some previous podcast episodes, we've talked about demographics too, Amy, where there's where the shift of the baby boomers have now pretty much are almost all the way out of the workforce. They're getting there, and there's a big group of them that have been the forefront leaders for decades in some cases, and now they're leaving. And you have the Gen Xers, I should say, with the millennials and the Gen Zs behind us, the Gen Xers being a smaller population overall, just do the numbers. So there's less there that can then lead. And we're like, well, there's a gap, right? There's a gap of leadership. There's a gap that's needed. So it's like, you're feeling the weight of that in the company. And so absolutely. And that's why I loved having you here on the podcast, because we're about synergies. How can we work and collaborate together? And that's why Amy and I are here. We're happy, to talk with you, follow up with you. Amy, we're going to provide, again, links to your website. Amy and I are connected on LinkedIn. If you guys want to reach out to us there. As we're getting close to the end of the podcast here, Amy, I want to just, we covered a lot of different areas in wellness and how to audit that. But, what's a takeaway? What's something that you want to leave folks to be thinking about, as far as maybe it's a mind shift, the leaders you want to adopt to create a healthier workplace, or what is it that you would just impart to our listeners just as we wrap up the podcast today?
Well, really, for leaders to be open to investing in your employees, and your workforce, and your managers. Um,
Mhm.
Burnout's on the rise. We saw from the recent Gallup report, the workplace report, that uh, a big percentage of managers aren't doing their job well, and it's affecting how the employees are and the managers,
Yes.
and they need to be supported. And
Yes.
it
Yes.
doesn't have to be a huge money. I mean, we can do this,
Right?
right?
Absolutely. No, it's the preventative. You invest now, and it's much less expensive than having, lawsuits, losing employees, having so many other challenges. And that's why we do this Business Roundtable podcast, to have folks like yourself, Amy, to help educate and know that people have another resource that they can reach out
Yes.
to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It was really a pleasure having you, Amy,
Thank you.
and sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And I hope that you, the listener, go and reach out to Amy and connect with her. I'm honored to have you here on the podcast. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks. I'm so grateful. And it was a pleasure spending time with you, David.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We always appreciate you liking and subscribing. Leave a review, comments. Amy and I will follow up on any comments you have for us. We're happy to do that. And again, appreciate you guys being here. Thanks so much. Until next time, take care and be well, everybody.
Thank you.